Hey guys, I finally bring you my two-handed melee build for the Sororitas class. You can use this build on the Power Halberd, the Power Maul, the Eviscerator and the Greatsword. This time I tried out some new enchant and psalm doctrine combinations and I'm really happy with the result. The build deals great damage even to the Harbinger enemies on plus 18 missions. So let's get started. Let's start with attributes. Contempt isn't that important. The third milestone is okay for the extra damage in Saint form. Resolve on the other hand is much better. And you might wanna invest points into here first. You get all resistance, HP on kill and shield drain, which are all great to have in the early game. We want to max out passion, because the last milestone is very strong, making our Psychons last much longer. But also the inoculator capacity and movement speed is great to have. For our perks, you always want to use Blessing of Saint Victorious for the huge boost in survivability, but for the other two you have several good choices. This one, for example, gives us a 50% damage boost pretty much all the time. And this one is making our dots stronger and last longer, which is great since the build utilizes a lot of dot damage. But you could exchange them, for example, for those two perks. They are boosting our faith gain much more, while still giving a good damage boost. Use this if you wanna go into Saint form more often. Or you could use one offensive perk with this defensive one. With that perk, you can easily put your resists over 70%. And if you are just grinding, I recommend that you are using those two perks to increase your movement speed. With the last patch, we got much more information in our stat sheet, which is great. So as you can see, I went with a good amount of defenses. And consider that I'm using a Celestian armor for the extra Act of Faith slot. This one only provides damage reduction, not as a Seraphim armor, which also provides all resistances. If I would use this one, I could max out the resistances. And also consider that you get much more deflect if you are using a Greatsword in comparison to a Power Halberd. Our crit chance is very low, because our weapon enchants will give us guaranteed crits. Your crit strength should be over 40. So in combination with our neural implant that gives us 4 crit strength per Enrage token, and the main implant of Wrath, which gives us an additional 9 Enrage tokens, we get 29 times 4 crit strength. So we can easily go over the cap of 150. So our crits deal 400% damage and our dots are 200% stronger. Many of the damage boosts come from small passives, psalm codes and enchants. The bonus AoE damage comes mainly from the AoE shards. We wanna boost our AoE damage by a lot, since most of our weapon skills are AoE based. And we have a bunch of boosts to our dot damage. Mainly burn and bleed, but we will be applying poison as well. You also want a good amount of cooldown reduction, mainly for our acts of faith, but also to spam our weapon skills more often. For example, the Power Maul skills have very high cooldown. Lastly, we have a high amount of vulnerability effectiveness, since this boosts our damage by a lot. Because of the new seasonal enchants, I finally can use a different setup for an Enrage token build. Now we can use the crit strength per Enrage token enchant on our neural implant and get our Enrage tokens on crit from the new seasonal eye implant. Get passion on here first, so we can go to the 25 points in our attributes. Then get all resists, and after that go for burn or bleed damage. And of course, if you get a 6 enchant item like this one, then you can go for AoE damage and the other dot damage. On the eye implant, I would say go for the AoE damage and crit strength, but for the other enchants you can have a look if you wanna roll something else. It seems that you can only get primary enchants on this seasonal eye implant. The main implant will be the before mentioned main implant of Wrath for the extra Enrage tokens. Socket here AoE damage and effectiveness. And before you can get it, you can use the normal relic one with the damage per Enrage token enchant. For the purity seal, I chose this enchant. So we get more shock triggers. This will be important in combination with our Psalm Doctrine in our armor. For our enchants, go full defensive here, except for the cooldown reduction. In our belt slot, we are using a Holy Censer. With this, we can use an additional Act of Faith. The relic enchant will be this one, so we have a way to apply poison. I would say the suppression gain is really important here, and we can boost our burn and bleed damage even further. The shock on burn enchant will be also very useful, so we can trigger our Psalm Doctrine even more. Socket again, effectiveness and AoE damage. We are using a Celestian armor, so we get an additional Act of Faith slot, and I recommend playing this build on a Radical Sororitas. It will give us access to this enchant, which is a great death protection. If you are playing on a Puritan character, you could use this enchant instead. This Architect enchant is also a decent defensive alternative. If you cannot get any of them, you could also socket the Ethereal Psalm Doctrine to get another great death protection. If you are doing this, then just socket the Shock Psalm Doctrine into your weapon and just remove this one, since this one is not so important. For the rest of the enchants, just roll defenses again. The Psalm Doctrine is this one, so we trigger shock explosions. That's the reason why we want so many shock triggers. It will give us great AoE damage as long as there are at least 2 enemies next to each other. On the Inoculator, I chose the Fear Aura enchant. I mainly wanna use it so we can stack our general vulnerability extremely fast, in combination with this Signum. If you wanna understand it more, you can check out my advanced player guide. I rolled Resolve on here, so we can get to the 15 points. The other 2 enchants I recommend are the cooldown on kill one and the Inoculator duration. You don't need this enchant, since we don't need supply charge drops. It's just a leftover when I was still using a banner before. Socket again, AoE damage and effectiveness. For the components, I'm using 2 Psychons, 1 Holdfast to make them last longer, and 1 Blood Balm for the healing. The weapons will be nearly identical in the setup. The Relic enchant is the guaranteed crit one. This will help us greatly with keeping our Enrage tokens up, and with our Neural Implant enchant, those crits deal 400% damage. And also noteworthy is that crits apply stronger dot effects. For the other enchants, get of course shield and life drain, and I chose knockdown on crit. This one in combination with this passive from the debuff tree allows us to get a lot of suppression. and we will also apply more shocks. On the Eviscerator and Greatsword, you don't really need that enchant, since they easily apply knockdowns. For our Psalm Doctrine, I'm using this one. This, in combination with the Shock on Burn enchant, will help us to trigger this Psalm Doctrine much more often. And in the last slot, I socket one Ordinado Psalm for the armor reduction. Our first signum will be this one, giving us the damage per Enrage token enchant. The cooldown is important here, and you might also want to get the Shock on Burn enchant on here. I chose one Thunderbolts on Hit enchant. They can deal decent damage and it's kind of fun to play with them. But you could easily exchange it if you want to. Our second signum will be the General Vulnerability one. It will give us another great damage boost. I would say the most important enchants here are the cooldown reduction and the damage bonus to our burns and bleeds. For our secondary weapon, I'm using a Flamer. But you could use anything else that applies persistent ground effects, like this one for example. Those persistent ground effects, in combination with the heat aura, can help us to easily stack up Enrage tokens if we ever get low, and also help to spread burns even further. If you wanna go with a Flamer, those enchants are a solid choice, giving us a lot of damage, some healing and heat cost reduction. For the signums I also chose a similar setup, only now I have crit chance on here and here, since I'm not using a guaranteed crit enchant on my weapon. For our Acts of Faith, I'm using this one, so we get a buff that our melee skills inflict bleed and also some heat vulnerabilities, and we get a passive damage bonus to our bleed effects. Our second Act of Faith will be this one, so our two-handed melee attacks deal splash damage in a 5-meter radius. This will help us to deal even more AoE damage and spread our dots even further. The Supreme Movement Speed passive is also nice to have. For our Sacred Rite, you want to use Burning Devotion. The fiery aura it provides, in combination with this passive, will help us to apply burns. We max out the AoE tree for all the benefits to our AoE effects and the nice amount of cooldown reduction we get from this one. The physical attack tree is also very important. Here we get physical vulnerabilities, which increase our physical damage. This includes our bleed damage and poison damage, since they are physical damage based. This one gives us also a nice damage boost. In the damage over time tree, we get a lot of small benefits for our dots, like applying slow on bleeding enemies, disabling enemy HP regeneration, increasing our dot duration, or dealing more damage to armored enemies. In the debuff tree, we get the before mentioned shock or knockdown and the suppression gain or knockdown, which are both very important. In the crit tree, we get a nice damage boost with Red Thirst, up to 100% more damage, and we increase our suppression damage bonus and also get some healing. With the heat attack tree, we will be applying burns and also apply heat vulnerabilities. This will increase also our burn damage. 3 points in warfare for the 30% damage boost, 3 points in Acts of Faith for the energy shield efficiency and the cooldown reduction for our Acts of Faith, 5 points in banners for the effectiveness, capacity and another way to reset our inoculator cooldown. In the movement skill tree, we get a bunch of cooldown reduction. The points in the defensive tree are mainly for the resistances and the second chance we get with this passive. Now I show you some 118 mission gameplay for every weapon, starting with the Power Halberd. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, check the link in the description down below.
They may be great in numbers, but if we sever the head, the body will die. Kill their leaders and break their will. He deserved worse. Much worse. Success is measured in blood. Severed the head. Now you can watch the body wander aimlessly. The web of heresy and corruption is spun by powerful beings and perverted minds. Hunt their leaders, and this construct of evil will come crashing down. deserved worse. Much worse. Watch the body wander aimlessly until it withers and dies.
Priority purge protocols initiated and being observed. Noospheric data streams are thrice encrypted and set to optimal flow. Good hunting. Deletion complete. Singularity removed. targets eliminated. Enemy command structure compromised.
Oh, the sweet stench of imminent death. The craving for bloodshed before the battle. I wish I could be there with my battle brothers. Take the enemy head on, lay waste to their strongholds, and show no mercy. Position taken. Deny the spent flesh and aching wounds. Onwards to victory. Fortified zone is finally ours. Blessed be the God Emperor. Capture the next one. The Emperor protects. Overran and butchered without mercy. A just end to the fire. The strong point is ours. Move on. Once again, the enemies of the Imperium failed miserably.